And joining us now to discuss is Jewish activist Rob Garson and president for the American Association of Jewish Lawyers. We also have Jake Novack with us as well. Jake, your reaction to Daniel Cohen's report, it is just horrible what is happening to these hostages again, and especially those 3 mistakenly killed by the IDF, but the ultimate forgiveness from that mother.
Well, I can't thank you enough for first starting the segment with the pictures of the hostages and reminding everyone of the human factor here. But I would defy anyone to read the English translation of what that mother sent to the brigade, or even if you don't understand Hebrew, to listen to the voicemail, because you can hear the voicemail, and not burst into tears. Because she doesn't just say, come for a hug. She says, we want you to come to the house. We want to talk to you. I've heard similar stories about some of the families in Vietnam of boys who were killed by friendly fire, and the families welcoming the people who came to their home. I think there was a scene similar to that in Born on the 4th of July with Tom Cruise. But this is well beyond that. This is one of the most emotional things, and this war is terrible. Everything about it is connected to terrible, but when you see that kind of compassion and heroism, I mean, she didn't have to do any of this. At least there's something positive coming out of it that we can see.
Rob, what do you make of Hamas saying that they're going to end negotiations once again, at least the talks of them, to try and get back hostages here? What do you make of that?
Well, you're not dealing with an honest broker. You never have been dealing with an honest broker. Let's be honest. They are a terrorist entity, and whatever they say or don't say has to be taken with a pinch of salt. They're currently holding 140 hostages. And out of those hostages, one shudders to think, given the atrocities with mutilations, the sexual assaults that we've heard about, that we've seen, we've witnessed on the videos, on Hamas's own videos, one shudders to think what some of those hostages are going through at the moment, undergoing at the moment, what they're suffering at the moment. And frankly, that's all Hamas can do, is hunker down and terrorize and fight. They've got no desire at the moment for peace. They've never had a desire for peace. Had Hamas ever had a desire for peace, they wouldn't have launched these horrific attacks on October 7th.
I want to move on to this, Jake. Your thoughts on the United Nations Security Council. They're voting today on a highly anticipated resolution that would call for a halt in fighting in the war in Gaza and a major increase in aid deliveries. However, the U.S. expressing concerns over this resolution, arguing that the proposal of a UN-created monitoring mechanism for aid going into the Gaza Strip could actually slow down the delivery of critical assistance. But I also wonder that gives Hamas even more time to ramp up yet again to attack Israel.
Yeah, the UN's lack of timing and tone deafness is pretty big here. This is actually a ridiculous timing on their part, because just in the last 18 hours or so, maybe a little bit less, the reports I'm getting are that the Israelis have finally overrun, or at least been able to severely weaken, the strongest stronghold that Hamas has in southern Gaza. And they have increased their activity since then, not because they're trying to do a mop-up operation, but it looks like they've weakened that stronghold in the south, and that some of the fighters now no longer under the protection of that area are now in more disparate areas, and so the Israelis now have a better shot at getting them. In other words, this is one of the most intense moments in this war going on right now, and of course this is when the UN would like to call time out, because the UN is basically a rear guard for Hamas.
Expand on that. Rob, we're going to get to you on the same topic in a second, but why? Why do you think they're coming in now with that?
Because, again, this is like Hamas has always had, and terrorists in all the Middle East, but especially in Israel, have always used the European governments, and in this case the UN, which they've used all the time, as basically an ally. The UN works as an ally towards these terrorists, and that's what ceasefires do. If we would just let this war end, which we've been fighting in Israel for 70-plus years, you would have a lot less death. They keep calling time out on these things. It's like the opposite of ripping the Band-Aid off really quickly. It's putting it back on every time, so we rip it off again and again. It just causes more death.
Rob, same question. Do you agree, disagree with this timing of the UN calling for that ceasefire?
The UN have shown themselves to be particularly useless, as they have done over years and years when it comes to conflicts like this. They were useless when it came to stopping the atrocities of the Tutsis with the Hutus, and they've been useless now. Jay's entirely correct. Israel has got to finish the job, because otherwise, what's going to happen? Let's say you call a truce. Let's say there's even a long-term ceasefire in relation to all of this. What, we're going to let Hamas now spend another 10, 20 years amassing weapons, weapons, taking monies from the European Union, sitting on billions in Qatar, and using those monies to educate children to hate, so we get another round of terrorism, another 1,200 raped and mutilated and killed in 20 years. It's nonsensical. Israel has to be allowed to finish and do the job for the Palestinian people to have hope at having a life after this.
I want to get your thoughts on this, Jake, because we know that Hamas has said now it would not discuss a new deal to release Israeli hostages that it's holding in Gaza unless Israel agrees to end hostilities. But I will say Secretary of State Antony Blinken said, well, wait a minute. If Hamas actually agrees to end the war, then, of course, Israel will stop. But again, that would mean that Hamas was not destroyed. So a very difficult strategy to determine. What do you say?
Well, this is the tell. You know, if you're playing poker with these people, this is the ultimate tell. Anyone who says they care about Palestinian lives, anyone who says that the Israelis are killing too many civilians, there's a very simple solution to this. Just tell Hamas to surrender. Release the hostages and surrender. And it really wouldn't have to be every single Hamas fighter. It would just be, let's say, the top 10, 20 leaders that are left. Then you'd have peace. But have you noticed that none of the people protesting in the streets and none of the people in the UN are calling for that? That's the ultimate tell. They don't really care about the Palestinians' lives either.
But would you have peace unless all of Hamas is wiped out?
I think that if you got the top people in Hamas to surrender and a decent number of their more trained and armed groups to surrender as well, yes. But you make a good point. It can't just be 2 or 3 top leaders. But the fact is, without them, they are severely weakened. And, of course, then we find out where the other strongholds are, and they could easily either be taken out or told surrender now, or you'll go the same way as some other people.
Well, Jake Novack, we appreciate the insight coming here and explaining. You always do very well. Rob Garson, you, sir, thank you for coming on just as well.
Thank you, Ray.